All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Sunday morning, welcome to another edition of All Indiana Politics. I'm Phil Sanchez. Voters in East Central Indiana will pick a new member of Congress next month. Republican Congressman Greg Pence is not seeking another term. Once again, this race features three candidates, all of whom have appeared on ballots before. Republican Jefferson Shreve ran unsuccessfully for the mayor of Indianapolis last year. Democrat Cinde Wirth ran against Pence for the same seat 2 years ago, and Libertarian James Sceniak ran for the U.S. Senate back in 2022. All three of them talked to our government reporter, Garrett Bergquist. We begin with Jefferson Shreve.
I'm running to represent the 6th District, which is the part of our state that I was born in, raised in, grew a business in, to bring my voice, to bring 30-odd years of experience, both business and local government experience, to the federal level, to be the voice for the citizens of the 6th.
The economy is playing a pretty big role in this election, especially inflation and the price of housing. What are your plans to address those two issues?
Inflation is a problem, and it arises from the government spending that we have just run wild with over the last many years. Our deficit is up to $35 trillion. And everyone's looking from a global capital market standpoint. We've got to focus on our fiscal security, and you'll see me lean into that heavily with teammates as a working member of the delegation in Congress. Focus on the fiscal, and in turn, this will take some time, in turn, we'll begin to move inflation back into check. Housing is part and parcel with that. You can't have workforce development. You can't keep people in communities or grow communities without housing, but we've got to do those things to keep housing affordable.
As you noted, the national debt is now at $35 trillion and still climbing. How specifically do you plan to bring that down?
You can't lop off great big pieces of our federal government. The fat is marbled in the system, but we've got to take on our constitutional congressional responsibility of putting forward a thoughtful, cogent budget for the United States of America. What we've been doing is working from continuing resolution to continuing resolution. It's going to take work because the fat, as I said, has been marbled in the system, and a lot of it arose from our response to COVID some years ago. But this is a trend line that we just have to turn around if we are going to remain the global leader on the economic stage.
What's your plan for the southern border?
We got to secure it. What does that mean? Well, it's got to be physically completed. We need a physical barrier that will run across the southern border, and we've got to complete that job. And then we need to fix our broken immigration system. We've got to have a cogent pathway to legal, lawful immigration. I'm not in favor of locking everyone out. Our economy is vibrant in part because we have access to labor markets, but there have to be pathways to lawful immigration. And the system that we have today is so broken. People come across the border and they filter into the system, awaiting the process for another year and a half, and at that point, they're lost in the system.
What fixes specifically would you want to make to the legal immigration system?
We have to turn back those that come across our border illegally. We can't let them take asylum for the next year and a half, awaiting a hearing before there's some possible extradition, which rarely happens. We've got to turn them back.
What should we do about the people who are already here unlawfully?
We've got to turn some of those folks back that just have no standing in this country. We cannot afford to pull them into our education and healthcare systems if they haven't worked through the process in the lawful fashion that our Constitution and our laws have defined. It's not fair to all of those that have lawfully worked hard for citizenship or for legal immigration to work in this country.
We're recording this interview barely a week after the nation's latest mass shooting, this time at a high school in Georgia. How should Congress address this issue? Other developed countries don't have the same level of mass shootings or firearm homicides generally that we do.
Well, this is something I've thought a lot about. We have guns in the hands of too many young people. 14, 15, 16-year-old kids shouldn't have guns. And we have that problem in parts of our capital city, Indianapolis, and in parts of our state. But I'm not in favor of taking lawful access to firearms away from the citizens of our country.
Let's turn to foreign policy. Should the United States continue military aid to Ukraine?
It's important that Ukraine win this war. We are in this, and it's important that we be helpful. But the United States can't write a blank check to the Ukrainian government, and other nations need to help us.
So what about U.S. aid specifically?
The U.S. is invested in this outcome. It's important that the Ukraine turn back the Russians. And so I'm in favor of supporting them toward this conclusion.
What about aid to Israel?
It's just important that we continue to support our biggest ally in the region. We remember vividly the events of October 7th. We need to be helpful with the return of the hostages that remain over there. We want the Israelis and the Hamas to settle this, but the Israelis are our ally, and I'll continue to favor support for them.
You served on the Indianapolis City County Council for a few years. You ran as mayor. You ran for mayor last year. How would you use that experience in Washington, working on federal policy?
Well, it gave me experience in working across the aisle. I served with a Democrat and a Republican administration while in council, and I served with a Democrat majority in both instances. And the ability to pull hearts and minds across the aisle to move legislation down the field is experience that I'll bring with me in what is very likely to be a closely divided government in the 119th Congress.
All right, coming up, we turn to the Democratic candidate for the 6th District, Cinde Wirth. Welcome back. We continue our conversations with the candidates for the 6th Congressional District. Democrat Cinde Wirth is making her second run at this seat. She sat down with our Garrett Bergquist.
So I was a high school teacher for about 10 years, and what I saw in my high school classroom with my students' families were solutions that could be addressed from the federal level, and things like living wages and parents not having to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make ends meet. So those are some of the reasons why I decided to run for Congress.
The economy is playing a big role in this election, especially with inflation and the cost of housing. How do you plan to address those two issues?
So I think there are things that we can do at the federal level. There are some first-time home buyer incentives that we can use to ease the burden of people trying to buy their first houses. And these are programs that were also in place back in the late 80s and early 90s. So some of those, I think we could see a return of those, and I would definitely advocate for those. On the price gouging for consumers, I think we need to hold companies responsible for that. And there are various pieces of legislation that are antitrust and pro-competition that I think when we put some strength and some teeth into those, we can really help protect consumers.
You called for raising the minimum wage. You've also called for paid family leave. Are there any specific numbers you're looking for?
I think that when we attach specific numbers to there, when we're looking across the nation, there are different numbers that we need depending on where we are in the country. So I think it needs to be a livable wage for wherever we are in the country. And I think that can depend, because a livable wage in Indiana might be significantly different from what a livable wage is in Southern California.
What's your plan for the southern border?
So We have a border package bill that was a good bipartisan bill that was put forth this spring. And I uphold all of the things that were in that, and I would vote for that and support that 100%. That was shot down for purely political reasons. And I think playing political games with people's lives is wrong. And when I'm in Congress, I won't do that. I will vote for people and not just toe a party line or whatever line to play political football.
What about the legal immigration system? So
we know that the legal immigration system has some issues and it needs to be retooled. And part of that border package addressed that. It gave money for more agents. It gave money for streamlining the legal system. And one of the things that we can't forget is we have a lot of dreamers in the United States. Children who were people who were brought here as children, who have grown up here and this is their home. And we need a valid pathway for citizenship for them because they are integral to our communities. We know that. We know without them, our communities and our workforce would be in trouble. And we need to find good ways to support them.
We had another school shooting this fall, this time at a high school in Georgia. How should Congress address that issue?
So as a teacher, I've been one of those teachers to shepherd my students through those run, hide, fight drills and in an active shooter scenario when we had a gunman a couple doors down at a bank. So that is an issue that absolutely needs to be addressed at the federal level with more rigorous background checks, more legislation that's common sense, not taking anyone's guns away, but making it more difficult for people who don't need to have weapons, especially high-capacity magazine weapons, to be able to get them easily. When the military locks their weapons down, but we don't, I think that's an issue. And I'm not against guns. I grew up hunting. I grew up with guns in the house. And I think gun safety is one of the biggest things that we're missing right now. And part of gun safety is making sure that the people who are in possession of guns are able to use them appropriately. And I think those gun safety background checks are a big part of that.
Our national debt is now at $35 trillion and climbing. What's your plan to get that under control?
So, I mean, the national debt is something that that is of great concern because I think it puts us a little bit at risk internationally. But one of the things that we're not doing is taxing everybody appropriately, excuse me, and putting a tax on the top 1% and people who are making salaries of over $400,000 and taxing them appropriately, I think is one of the best ways that we can achieve that.
Let's turn to foreign policy for a moment. Should the United States continue providing military aid to Ukraine?
Absolutely. I think supporting our allies to promote democracy and defend democracy across the world is one of our responsibilities from the United States. And I think without our help, we would have seen Ukraine not do as well as they are doing. And I think we do need to keep taking a firm stand against aggression toward our allies.
How about Israel?
Again, I think every country has the right to defend themselves. When you look at defending yourself, you also have to consider that there may be a humanitarian piece to that on the other side. So I think when innocent civilians are targeted, I think that is wrong and that needs to be stopped. We do need to advocate for peace, first of all. And in Israel, I think we need a two-state solution, at least between Israel and Palestine. And the release of the hostages is integral to that.
All right, coming up, we hear from the Libertarian candidate, James Sceniak. Welcome back. Libertarian James Sceniak rounds out the field for the 6th Congressional District. The Libertarian Party has candidates in all of Indiana's congressional races this year. Our Garrett Bergquist sat down with him.
I believe that Hoosiers need an alternative choice from the Republicans and Democrats. They need someone to better represent them, and I believe I can do that in the 6th District.
The economy is playing a big role in this election, especially the cost of housing and inflation. What are your plans to address those two issues?
we got to get it under control, and ultimately a lot of inflation is due to Washington, D.C. spending. We've seen an increase in spending on both the Republican and Democrat side. They're clearly not fixing this issue. So there's a lot of things we could do about inflation, but ultimately we look at the spending in Washington, D.C. and having to rein down that, look at the budget there, and then once we get that under control, it'll have a trickle-down effect, and it'll definitely benefit Hoosiers once we do that.
What's your plan for the southern border?
We definitely need to secure our southern border. It's important that we have a secure nation, but also, like President Ronald Reagan said, we also need to be a city on a hill for immigrants. So it's a balance. So a very secure border, but we also need a process that allows immigrants in who want a better life in America.
What would that process look like?
We're going to vet them. We're going to make sure that they're here for the best interest of Americans, but also making sure that we have a clear way in. The lottery system isn't really working. The way we allow immigrants in now doesn't allow for enough legal immigrants to come in, and that's why we see so many illegal immigrants coming in. Once we get that process streamlined, we'll see less people trying to cross the border illegally and come through a legal process where they can be vetted. So it's a win-win for Americans once we get that situated and under control.
We had another school shooting this fall, this time at a high school in Georgia. How should Congress address this issue? Other developed countries don't have the level of mass shootings we do.
I mean, my heart goes out to, the schools and the issue, and it's very real. We've seen it even in 2020 when I was running, in 2020 as well. 2022. It's an issue that keeps coming up, and we've got to do something better. I want to look at schools and how we can secure schools better. We can make sure the doors are locked. When I worked within a school, there's a 3-door system, security system. So making sure that we have those securities in place, and working with teachers for better emergency responses, working with police officers. And then the last topic I'd like to address is just mental health in general. Sadly, a lot of these shootings come from people who really could benefit from mental health. And when we address those issues at the core and address their heart issues, we'll see a decrease in crime. So getting people mental health and increasing that within our health system as Americans.
Our national debt is now at $35 trillion and climbing. How do you plan to get that under control?
Well, this is, again, where Democrats and Republicans have failed us. They don't have a plan to decrease spending. We have to look at an actual real plan. And, I look at Ron Paul's penny plan and how to decrease spending within Washington, D.C. We don't run businesses like that. Hoosiers are great at running businesses, but you can't run in a deficit forever. So we have to get that under control. And that's ultimately we're looking at each branch of the government and how do we reduce each by, like the penny plan suggests, 1% within the first year and then continue to decrease, and a realistic approach. But it has to be done and it has to be reined in. Republicans and Democrats are definitely not doing this right now.
Let's turn to foreign policy. Should the United States continue to supply military aid to Ukraine? So
Ukraine's a very interesting situation, and I believe our spending there is gotten out of hand. We need to promote peace, no matter where that is. And Ukraine is one of those places we need to promote peace between Russia and Ukraine. We can do that with economic with our economy, right? So we can look at how to put economic pressure on Russia, how to tell you without the spending on Ukraine. So we have to have a win-win there. I think that too many times we've interfered with foreign policy in foreign countries. And so I think putting a little bit more economic pressure on Russia and promoting peace there is the solution.
What about aid to Israel?
Again, our allies, we have to respect our allies, and Israel has been a strong ally, especially in the Middle East. So very important to respect our allies. That being said, we need to promote peace first. We need to promote economic stability within the Middle East and promote that peace. We need to encourage Israel to look first for peace so that the civilian casualties that we're seeing on both sides are reduced. It's burdensome and it should be worrisome when we see children dying. So on both sides, we need to see that stopped. And but we also need to support our allies.
So I want to be clear. So would you continue military aid to Israel or Ukraine?
Israel, definitely yes. Ukraine, I'd have to look a little bit more at. They're not part of the UN. It's a complicated situation. They were about to join. So looking at that situation, it's possible that some aid would be given to Ukraine.
And thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics this week. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And if you'd like to hear more from the candidates of this week's show, check out our podcast, wishtv.com.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.